Welcome to this Brain Blast, and I want to talk a little bit more, and I know there's been various conversations in the community, in the press, and maybe one or two mentions in Brain Blast before about lifestyle. Lifestyle and the brain. It's actually really important, and I think on two levels. The first level is that what we do affects who we are, and so that's obviously a very important thing, always to take advantage. We need to take advantage of all the possibilities that we have in order to maximize our potential and our possibilities. But the other one is that people talk about lifestyle and the brain like they're separate items, like the way my body works and my brain works are separate things. This is sort of bordering on the dualism of Descartes, that sort of the brain is not connected to the body. So when anyone talks about lifestyle, you should always think, and I wonder how that affects the brain. And whenever you think about the brain, you should always think, and I wonder how that's interacting with lifestyle. So they're all the one thing. You are one thing from top to bottom, and the brain, of course, has its unique contribution, and it certainly has a sort of an organizing, operating, managing kind of action is going on. But in another Brain Blast, I'll talk about how much the gut organizes the brain. And so maybe the gut is actually in charge of everything. But the thing I want to talk about is a couple of articles and another idea that I've talked about quite a few times. And one is an article I read on the perfect exercise for a better brain. The other one is on the new research on seasonal affective disorder, SAD. And then I also want to talk about sickness behaviour, which is sort of related to SAD a bit. So when we talk about perfect exercise, what's the perfect exercise? What's the perfect exercise for your brain? What's the perfect exercise for taking off weight? What's the perfect exercise for building good biceps? We have this thing where we keep looking for the perfect exercise, the perfect activity to develop something in our bodies or our brain. And the first question is, remember when I say what matters, what do you look in, what do you notice, what is the message, what is the message in the problem. So the first thing that we're looking for as a message is, so why aren't we doing that? So if we're looking for something that's really good for the body, why aren't we doing that? And of course, we very quickly get to look at the fact that our body evolved in a very, very different environment than the culture and the society and the city nature and the more sedentary jobs and the highly enriched food that we live with. So when we talk about lifestyle, we really, and improving lifestyle, we talk about the fact that we don't live the lifestyle that this biology actually organized itself around. And the lifestyle we have, we're finding we have to moderate and regulate in order to stay healthy. So that's just number one. That's just something we're extracting from what is causing the inconsistency and the discontentment between our lived experience and the environment and the society and the cultural world in which we live in. But let's get back to this article. We're just talking about what's the perfect exercise. Is it long distance running, endurance sort of work? Is it weightlifting, sort of high impact work? Is it short, sharp activities? And it's so interesting because if you go and look at the literature in various areas, short, sharp activities are argued as very good for cardiovascular health. And actually bearing weight training is considered to be very good for some of the aspects of joint and joint aspects there. When it's done badly, it's very bad for it. When it's done well, it's very good for it. So we're pulling things apart. We're dissecting things. Instead of differentiating, we talk about interpersonal neurobiology. You differentiate the elements, sure, so you can discuss them individually. But then you need to relink them and re-engage them and reintegrate. And it's integration and connection, and where everything is working in some kind of concert. That's when we have good health. So when we're talking about what's the best exercise, and actually the end result of this article was it's actually long distance, sort of persistent long distance endurance exercise. Well, that kind of makes sense. That's the kind of life we lived. That's the kind of life as this organism organised itself through evolutionary processes. It was organised through the process of having to exercise for lengthy periods of time, chasing the prey, tilling the fields, whatever it was, in order to be able to maintain survival through the aspects of having enough food and preparing the food and so on and so forth. In fact, of course, like with many animals, it was really important to look physically strong, for men to look as though they were strong, because that gave the indication that they would be able to provide. Now, modern day sort of aspects, I suppose maybe now, if you look really nerdy and you look as though you're a computer geek, maybe that makes you attractive because, I mean, there's all these interesting things. It keeps chopping and changing, and I don't know which one's right or which one's wrong. I mean, I just look like me. It's the only person that I've got. So the essence, though, is when you're looking at what's best for me, think of yourself as a biology which has organised itself over a long period of time, not necessarily in the framework of culture and society and availability of exercise and activity and food and so on and so forth. And bear all that in mind to find a balance. Not maybe trying to find the best, the most, the ideal. Maybe that's the problem that we have, rather than finding the connected, the integrated, the collectively satisfying for me as an individual. And this is very important in what it says about SAD, seasonal affective disorder. And they were saying, well, we don't really have a lot of evidence about seasonal affective disorder being a problem. And that's just when it's in the wintry months, when it's in the low sun months, that people have a more depressive sense of things that are going on, a depressive feeling. And this is to do, we think, in the early days of talking about seasonal affective disorder, with a reduction in vitamin D, which is very important for neurobiological gene expression. So I think the jury's still out on that. But what I think is the problem is we get too carried away with, okay, it's all about SAD. It's all not about SAD. It's all about exercise activities. It's not anything about exercise activities. It's rather than, again, looking for the flow, looking for that way in which we can find a balance of things within the framework of our own experience. And that leads me to the final one, which is sickness behaviour, which is an aspect of response by our emotions to our immune system struggling with some kind of disease or pathogen or poison. And it is very healthy for us to feel a mood change, a change in positive affect into a more reserved or withdrawn affect when potentially we are ill. So we have messages coming to us about the state of health. We have messages coming to us about the types of biochemical processes that are going on. How much vitamin D? And that's a complicated one. I have to do a brain blast on vitamin D. That's a really good one. And then our constant battle for the perfect, the one that makes the ideal. There is no ideal. And all these things, gather this brain blast, the last brain blast, the next one, the actor blasts that we do. Bear them in mind and look for what they trigger that makes you feel better, both emotionally, affectively, thoughtfully, in your mental state, fits in with what you know and believe, and also biologically, where you find yourself having less illness, more happiness, greater joy. Because I don't want to make you brain-wise at the expense of your body. I want you to be brain-wise because it enables you to be a more joyous, more engaged, more wonderful human being. And that's my joy, and I hope it works for you. Thank you. Bye.